As always, it's been a fascinating year full of enormous hits that excited viewers and films they largely ignored. You might remember that in 2023, one of the big stories was Disney having an underwhelming year full of expensive flops, and people wondered when they would ever recover. Turns out extremely quickly, as 2024 saw Disney once again rise to the top with several massive blockbusters that got people buying tickets. That biggest success came with Inside Out 2, which not only became the highest-grossing Pixar film, but also the highest-grossing animated film of all time. It really resonated with audiences who'd become attached to those emotions, and I will not be surprised if we go inside Riley's head again in the future. Pixar remains a highly valuable studio for a reason. Then you have Marvel's lone release of 2024, Deadpool & Wolverine, which also crossed the billion-dollar mark, largely thanks to the popularity of Ryan Reynolds' foul-mouthed superhero and Hugh Jackman's portrayal of that clawed X-Man. Marvel Studios will have 3 movies in 2025 again, so it'll be interesting to see if they're back to guaranteed hits or audiences will be picking and choosing like they've done the past few years. Moana 2 capitalized off the continued adoration and streaming success of its predecessor and is also heading towards $1 billion as I record this. So the decision to turn this from a Disney Plus show to a theatrical feature turned out to be a profitable one. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes showed there remains an interest in that franchise and seeing the evolution of those talking apes, with plans already underway for the next film in the saga. Another classic 20th Century Fox franchise similarly saw a successful new entry with Alien Romulus, and I was particularly impressed with how it performed in China. Even though Hollywood films rarely pull in big numbers in the country anymore, this one really resonated with audiences there and more than doubled the gross of the previous Alien movie. Mufasa the Lion King had an underwhelming start but has now picked up steam and is chugging along really nicely. While it won't come anywhere near how much the Lion King remake made in 2019, it still looks like it will close out with a healthy profit. I'm very curious to see what the final numbers are. Disney's one major box office disappointment in 2024 was The First Omen, with audiences showing a lack of interest in this prequel to the horror classic, but it was at least inexpensive to produce. I should probably also mention Young Woman in the Sea, a Jerry Bruckheimer-produced biopic that was given a limited release with Disney not reporting the grosses, but it was well liked by those who saw it and deserved better treatment than it got. As you can see, Disney really rebounded the box office this year, which is not surprising if you know their history of continually bouncing back after a rough period. Their closest competitor lately has been Universal Pictures, which also had a very strong year. Despicable Me 4 retained the incredible consistency of that series at the box office, as the Minions remain enormously popular with their gibberish antics having appeal all over the world. The musical Wicked has also become a big hit, with movie audiences getting swept up by this depiction of Oz that has long attracted theatergoers. The risky decision to split the story into 2 parts has proven to be the right choice. DreamWorks Animation had a fantastic year with their 2 movies, with Kung Fu Panda 4 pulling in particularly big numbers, and The Wild Robot did very well, becoming the family film of choice during the early autumn months. An interesting box office performance came with Twisters. The film was a big hit domestically, with many wanting to experience the tornado spectacle on the big screen, but did not make much of an impact internationally. However, it should be noted that Warner Brothers handled the movie's release outside of North America, so if Universal wants to blame someone, they know who to point fingers to. Maybe if they make another movie, Universal will take all worldwide rights next time. Blumhouse remains a solid partner for the studio, with the horror movie Night Swim and the thriller Speak No Evil pulling in respectable numbers on their $15 million budgets. Even though Dev Patel's action movie Monkey Man did not break any records, Universal likely earned their investment back after buying the movie from Netflix for $9 million. The studio did have a few movies that struggled during their box office runs. They had high expectations for The Fall Guy, even scheduling as the kickoff to the summer season, but the results were very disappointing. The spy flick Argyle did even worse, although Universal was only a distributor, with Apple paying for the production costs and half the marketing, so they were not hurt by its failure. Finally, the horror movie Abigail did not attract much interest, while Warner Brothers had a few massive hits. That overall year was not a particularly good one. Dune Part 2 was their biggest success as viewers returned to see the next chapter in the saga of Paul Atreides. Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire was another popular entry in the MonsterVerse franchise, and it even became the series' highest-grossing film, promising more team-ups with that radioactive dinosaur, giant gorilla, and any other enormous creatures they come across. Although it should be noted, these were produced by Legendary Pictures, with Warner Brothers primarily handling distribution, so if any studio deserves credit, it's Legendary. WB did accomplish a homegrown hit with Beetlejuice, showing there was indeed interest in seeing Tim Burton bring back the ghost with the most. Meanwhile, M. Night Shyamalan's Thriller Trap pulled in solid numbers on its reasonable budget and managed to outgross his previous film Knock at the Cabin by a decent margin. The rest of the studio slate, though, was filled with a fair amount of disappointment. Joker Folie à Deux was probably the most surprising one, with even the worst case scenario predictions likely not even matching the film's dismal performance. Even though this sequel had about 3 times the budget of the first movie, it took in only a fraction of Joker's billion-dollar gross, just squeaking past $200 million worldwide, as both critics and regular moviegoers largely disliked what Todd Phillips put together, and it sank like a rock. Furiosa and Mad Max Saga also struggled to capitalize on the goodwill of the previous film, and likely puts a dent on future visits to this post-apocalyptic Australia. The Western Horizon, an American saga, Chapter 1, did not find too many people buying tickets, although WB was only a distributor, with Kevin Costner and a few other investors putting up the money for his passion project. Horizon Chapter 2 was pulled from the schedule, and there is no date as I'm recording this, but it was shown at the Venice Film Festival, so I'm sure it'll reach screens at some point. The horror movie The Watchers and the animated Lord of the Rings prequel, The War of the Rohirrim, pulled in disappointing numbers too. Finally, I should bring up Clint Eastwood's courtroom drama, Juror Number 2. Despite being loyal to the studio for almost 50 years and the film being decently reviewed, Warner Brothers gave it a minimal release and did not reveal box office grosses, although a few European countries did report the numbers, with the movie doing particularly well in France. It was a very shoddy way to treat a film by such a celebrated director, and as a result of this, and also Disney's Young Woman in the Sea, the box office calculating firm Comscore told the studios that for any movie they don't plan on reporting the grosses for, they won't tell them the numbers either. So Warner Brothers has a lot to improve on, but if I could make a suggestion, maybe they should release more Looney Tunes movies. Maybe one centered on a Wile E. Coyote. Just throwing some ideas out there. The box office results for Sony Pictures were also a bit of a mixed bag. That biggest hit was Venom: The Last Dance, probably the only part of this unusual Spider-Man adjacent franchise to actually find appeal of audiences. Bad Boys: Ride or Die also did extremely well, so plenty of people still want to see those 2 Miami cops get into shootouts another man. Sony scored a particularly profitable hit with It Ends With Us, as it attracted a lot of the readers of Colleen Hoover's best-selling book, although it's looking like the film's biggest legacy will be the way Blake Lively was treated behind the scenes and the aftermath of that. The animated Garfield movie did quite well, particularly internationally, and a few low-budget films, the religious picture The Forge and the horror movie Terror, made something back. The other films Sony released in 2024 largely faltered though. The biggest embarrassments were the other Marvel adaptations they put out. Madam Web was seen as a joke, and poor Kraven the Hunter did not even get the honor of being memified, as viewers just reacted with a shrug. It's already been revealed Sony is putting an end to these movies, with that focus returning to ones that actually have Spider-Man in them. Even though Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire did about the same as the previous film, it was also more expensive and very likely lost money, so it'll possibly be a good while before we see the Ghostbusters in theaters again. Harold and the Purple Crayon did not interest the family audience. Afraid was the rare Blumhouse film to flop. The Book of Clarence brought in meager numbers and led to the end of Sony's short-lived distribution deal with Legendary, and despite very good reviews, Saturday Night only seemed to appeal to a niche audience. Sony picked up the American rights to Robert Zemeckis' experimental drama Here, and saw very few people showing up. They also released the romantic comedy Fly Me to the Moon theatrically for Apple, but that did little business too. That film's performance, along with Argylle, is probably the reason why Apple now seems to be moving away from giving them movies wide theatrical releases. Sony was even going to release the comedy Wolves, until Apple decided to pull the plug on those plans, and it only got a limited run before heading straight to their streaming service. Sony will often throw the dice on a bunch of projects of varying types and budgets, which is noble, but this was one of those years where many did not quite work out. So even though Paramount finished in last place in market share among the major studios, I think they actually had a better year than Sony did. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is the 2024 release Paramount will be the most pleased with, as the franchise continues to pull in impressive numbers. This feels like one of those film series that if audiences remain satisfied with what they do, and the fans are happy with whatever new elements they bring in from the video games, Sonic could be getting sequels for a while. Another series that has remained popular 3 films in is A Quiet Place. The prequel, Day One, proved audiences really like this concept, and it won't be long before we see those noise-hating aliens again. Bob Marley, One Love, interested fans of the beloved Jamaican singer, did very well, while the musical adaptation of Mean Girls is an example of how much that quotable teen comedy seems to have transcended generations. Even though Smile 2 made less than the first movie, its gross was still respectable, and the series will definitely continue. Paramount also had a few movies whose box office performances were quite curious. Gladiator 2 looks like it'll come close to matching the gross of the first movie, so there remains interest in Ridley Scott's depiction of ancient Rome. The problem is it had an enormous budget that'll take a long while to make back. The family film If did quite well in North America, especially after its opening weekend numbers were deemed underwhelming. However, its budget and international performance means it lost money during its theatrical run. And finally, even though it got great reviews, Transformers 1 was not able to break out, and while it could turn a profit down the road, I'm not sure it'll lead to any sequels. So as usual, a year of ups and downs for the major studios. It'll be exciting to see what happens in 2025 and what surprises await the studio slates. See you next time.